Welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. After the presentation, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. To ask a question at that time, please press *1. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the meeting over to Ms. Linda Abrazizi. Ma'am, you may begin.
Thank you, and good afternoon for those of you joining on the East and West Coast. Thank you for joining us for our webinar on license exceptions. I am pleased to note that we have more than 42 people registered for this webinar today. My name is Linda Abrazizi. I am an International Trade Specialist for the Marketing and Communications Office for the U.S. Commercial Service at the Department of Commerce. This webinar is being brought to you in cooperation by the U.S. Commercial Service and the Bureau of Industry and Security, and I would like to welcome all of our participants in the export community who are joining us from all across the United States to learn about a license exception, its function, and how to use one. You will learn how a license exception can save you valuable time in shipping an order and about the most used license exception provisions. In a moment, I'll turn this presentation over to Sharon Cook, who is our Export Policy Analyst of the Regulatory Policy Division of the Bureau of Industry and Security. She will be available at the end of this presentation to answer your questions. Also, for those of you who are still trying to join in, you can still log onto the webinar by entering the URL website and passcode for instructions that were sent to you by email. Now, we do have a few housekeeping details to make sure everyone gets the most benefit from this afternoon's webinar. You are able to hear this presentation via your telephone and view it simultaneously via your computer. So if you're not hooked up through both, please take a moment to do this. And if you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please press *0 anytime during this presentation. We will be taking written and voice questions. To ask a written question, we do invite you to type your questions on your screen. On the upper left-hand side of your computer, you will see the letters Q and A, which stand for question and answers. If you put your mouse's cursor over this icon, you can then ask and type a question. We will compile these written questions and present them as time allows for this presentation. Any type questions which are not answered during this webinar due to time constraints will receive a personal answer via email. We will also be taking voice questions. Press *1 and an operator will assist you with your voice questions. In addition, for those of you who are viewing this webinar, we have many handouts and attachments as well as a copy of this PowerPoint presentation. We would like you to go to the upper right-hand side of your computer where you will see an icon with 3 pieces of paper, one overlapping each other. If you put your icon over this, if you put your mouse's cursor over this icon, you will be able to download not only the PowerPoint presentation slide from this webinar, but you will also download the handouts and attachments, which are very important when you are viewing this webinar. In addition, all listeners will be provided with information for any individual follow-up counseling and expert research, expert assistance and market research. And now for those of you who just joined us, you can still log into our internet conference. And now I'd like to introduce live online Sharon Cook. Again, she helped us the first webinar of the series. She is the Export Policy Analyst of the Regulatory Policy Division of the Bureau of Security. And I'd like to introduce Sharon again. Sharon, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Linda. I'm glad to be here today to explain to you license exceptions. I like to be on the end of not telling you what you have to do, but telling you how to get out of those requirements. So today I'm going to go over license exceptions. We have 16 different license exceptions in the EAR, and I will be going over a number of them, not all of them, but the most that are used by you. And so if you could look, there is an attachment that lists the license exceptions, all the license exceptions that we have. And if you could just look that over, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. It gives a brief summary of all the license exceptions that we have. I'll be going over a number of list-based license exceptions as well as transaction-based license exceptions today. Yeah, just one moment. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. Okay, here we go. All right. There is an X in the box or some other license requirement. What do I do? You've heard from the other sessions that we've had how to determine a license requirement, how to do a classification and all. And you're going to want to turn to license exceptions only when there is a license requirement and not before then. The topics I'll be discussing today are what is a license exception, the restrictions that pertain to license exceptions, and some of the license exception criteria. You've seen this flowchart before. It was in the first presentation that I did on the overview of export administration regulations. I just want to show you where we are on the map. You've determined already that your item is subject to the AAR. You now know how to classify your item, and you're going down either side at this point, and you've looked over the general prohibitions, the end use and user controls, and you see on the left-hand side where there is an X in the box. That's using the Commerce Country Chart, which is also one of the attachments for today's presentation. All right, after you go to the right of that one, you'll see no license required. All right, if you're lucky enough, you'll get out there at that first exit. But if you can't get out there, then you'll go down because there is an X in the box, and you'll have to determine whether a license exception is available, and that's where we are today. What is a license exception? Well, the license exceptions are all described in Part 740 of the Export Administration Regulations. They are authorizations that allow you to export or re-export under stated conditions, items that are subject to the EAR that would otherwise require a license. So you don't have to apply for them in most cases. Most cases you just have to qualify for them, and then you go ahead and export. When can't you use a license exception? There are restrictions that pertain to all the license exceptions. They're found in 740.2 of the Export Administration Regulations. If exporting is a privilege, so if your authorization to use license exceptions has been suspended or revoked, you may not use a license exception. Your transaction is subject to a general prohibition that is not eligible for a license exception, then you can't use a license exception. For surreptitious interception devices, you cannot use a license exception. Crime control items to most destinations, can't use a license exception, and most missile technology controlled items are not eligible for license exceptions. Embargoed destinations are kind of tricky because you have to first look in 746 of the Export Administration Regulations under the embargoed destination. And under each of those destinations, it'll tell you which license exceptions are available for that embargoed destination. And so you'll have to look at 746 first to determine which ones you can use, and then you'll look at 740 to determine how to use that license exception. There's a number of other restrictions that pertain to license exceptions. You'll have to look in 740.2 to find those out. We're not going to go over all of them today because there's such a long list. All right, country groups. You have attached to this presentation a handout that goes over the country groups. And I'm going to explain all of those. Pulling out my handout. Okay, country group A. These are regime members, let me explain to you the mystery column, A1, which does not have a title. Those are the old COCOM members. COCOM no longer exists, so the title has been removed, but these are the old COCOM member countries. And if you look closely at each of the countries on the list, you'll see a little number 1, okay? Those were not actually members of COCOM, but they are cooperating countries. They cooperated with COCOM by implementing all the agreements that came out of COCOM, but they were not actually members of COCOM. And so they get a lot of the privileges that the A1 countries get because of that. In A2, you'll see all the Missile Technology Control Regime members. And A3 is the Australia group, which deals with chemicals, and Nuclear Suppliers Group. These are the countries that actually have nuclear-type technology, and they are considered the suppliers. And they are members and abide by the Nuclear Suppliers Group rules. Okay, country group B, these are allied countries. Our regulations are still set up. They've been around since 1950, and they are still set up in Cold War fashion. And Group B sort of associates with those that are not part of the Eastern Bloc countries. These are the rest of the world besides the Eastern Bloc countries. And so they still get favorable treatment under the EAR, and we use all these different country groups to explain eligibility for license exceptions, and in some cases we use them for license requirements. So they're very important to understanding your export controls and your license exceptions. Country group D, those are the countries that we have concerns over. We have D1, national security. Whenever you see an X in the box, we have a national security concern over that country. D2 are the countries where we have a nuclear concern. D3 are chemical weapons, chemical and biological weapons. And D4 is missile technology. Okay, so those are your country groups, which I will be referring back to, so don't put that paper too far away from you. All right. Now we're going to move into the section where I will explain list-based license exceptions. List-based are those that are listed on our Commerce Control List because their eligibility is tied closely to the technical parameters on the Commerce Control List. I'm going to ask you to pull out another attachment. This would be entitled ECCN Example for License Exceptions. If you pull that attachment out, you will see that I have put an example of an ECCN that's in our Commerce Control List. That ECCN is 3A002. And you'll see that it has different sections, which, you know, if you were involved with the webinars earlier in the week, then you would have had this all explained to you. Now you should know where the license exception paragraph is. If you go down, you'll see it, I've encircled it in red, and you'll see this license exception section. That's where the list-based license exceptions will be listed for each ECCN. You'll see here that LVS, GBS, and CIV have been listed. Those are not all of the list-based license exceptions, but those are the ones that pertain to 3A002. We have other list-based license exceptions like, for instance, license exception APP, which deals with computers. Obviously, this is not a computer, so you don't have APP listed in the license exception section. I would explain or like you to be aware that just because it's listed there does not mean that your 3A002 item is eligible. What it means is that that is the first step to being eligible, and that you must go to the LVS section in 740 of our Export Administration Regulations to determine if you meet all the criteria of LVS before you use it. I want to show you also, if you turn to further into this attachment, I've listed another ECCN. It's on the last page of the attachment. The ECCN is 3A003. And I listed this one just to show you that sometimes in the license exception section, it will say LVS NA or GBS NA or CIV NA, and NA means not applicable. And so for this license exception, these list-based license exceptions are not usable for this ECCN, but that does not mean that no license exceptions are eligible, because you may have a transaction-based license exception that you can use. All right, let's move on to license exception GBS. All of the license exceptions have a license exception symbol. Usually it is 3 alphas. In this case, country group or group B shipments, the license exception symbol is GBS. Whenever you use a license exception symbol on an export control document, such as the Automated Export System AES record, you are certifying that you have met all the criteria of that license exception. Therefore, when you use it, be aware that you are certifying to the U.S. government that you have met all the criteria. And therefore, if we check on those SEDs or AES like we do, we follow up, we look at it, we may do a follow-up audit and make sure that you did actually meet the criteria. So just be aware of that. I can tell you that a lot of people, not a lot, I guess, but some people use these and they're unaware that we do follow up. So I just wanted to let you know that we do follow up at times. And we have sort of tweaked the AES system so that only those ECCNs that are eligible for GBS you'll be able to use GBS on the AES system for that. If you try to use an ECCN that is not eligible for GBS, it will give you a fatal error. So just be aware that you have to use these carefully. Now, that was all free and additional to what I'm going over today. GBS is for shipments to country group B countries. All right, we already went over the country groups. And remember, country group B countries are those non-Eastern Bloc countries or the allied countries. It is for commodities requiring a license to the ultimate destination for national security reasons only. Now, this is a very complex thing to understand, this one statement. First of all, I want to point out that it says commodities. It does not say software or technology. Therefore, GBS can never be used for technology or software. It can only be used for commodities. And it's for those items that require a license to the ultimate destination for national security reasons only. Okay. I hope you have a large surface area because we are going to be looking at several documents at once. Pull out your ECCN example for license exceptions again, the 3A002. Okay. Hold on one moment.
Okay. I just want to make sure that everyone understands where to get this, these sheets, these handouts again, because she's going to go over that, and I just want to make sure everyone knows. On the upper right-hand side, there is an icon with 3 pieces of paper, and it says handouts. And if you click on that, you will see boxes next to each of the attachments. And she's going over the ECCN example for license exception. It's the third one down in that list. And if you put your check mark in that box, and then on the right-hand side, you'll see it says download that's what you need to press, download, and you can download this to your computer or to an account or folder in your computer. I just want to make sure everyone has that opportunity to look at that attachment and all the other attachments. I'm sorry to interrupt. Here you go.
Okay, thank you, Linda, because this would not be a useful exercise if you're not looking at the documents that I'm looking at and that I've included with the presentation. Okay, so back to our explanation. We're looking at the ECCN example for license exceptions, 3A002. We're looking in that license exception block. And for GBS, you'll see yes for 3A002A1, and it continues. And I circled on that page below, you'll see A1. That means all the items that are described in A1 of 3A002 are eligible for GBS when going to country group B. Okay? Now, to be eligible, all right, let's go up above that first red block to the license requirements. You see in the license requirements section, NS applies to the entire entry, NS column 2. And you also see AT applies to the entire country, AT column 1. Okay? Now, going back to our slide, it says in that second bullet, commodities requiring a license to the ultimate destination for national security reasons only. Okay, we're trying to understand that sentence. Okay, what does that mean to have a commodity that's requiring a license to the ultimate destination for national security reasons only? Okay. Let's look at the license requirements section again under 3A002. We see that there are two reasons for control, national security reasons and AT. So now I want you to pull out a different attachment. Like I said, I hope you have a lot of space. We're going through an exercise here. Okay. The attachment that we're now pulling out is called 738 SPIR, S-P-I-R. It is actually the Commerce Country Chart. Okay, now we're looking at the Commerce Country Chart, and let's say, for example, that we are exporting to Afghanistan, the very first country on the country chart. If we are shipping a 3A002 product to Afghanistan, the license requirements section tells us to look under NS column 2. So we look under NS column 2 for Afghanistan, and lo and behold, we see an X. Okay. Now we look under AT column 1, because that's what 3A002 told us to look under. So we look under, we go on the Afghanistan row, slide over until we're right under the AT column 1, and we see that there is no X. Okay? You can ignore all the other X's on there for 3A002 because they do not apply to 3A002. We're only interested in those two columns, NS column 2 and AT column 1. Now, there was only an X, and when you're looking at evaluating those two columns, there was only an X under the one column, NS column 2. That means that a license is required for 3A002 for NS security or national security reasons only, not for the anti-terrorism reasons. Okay? So, going back to our slide, our second bullet, if we were evaluating the 3A002, it is a commodity. So commodities requiring a license to the ultimate destination, and in this case we chose Afghanistan, for national security reasons only. It means there's an X in the box only under the NS reason and not under the AT reason that it told us to look under. So 3A002 meets that criteria. So license exception GBS would be eligible, or 3A002 would be eligible for GBS, but only for paragraph A1 under 3A002 and paragraph B for that parameter. So you have to put it all together to make it work. I know it's complex. I know you got a lot of complexity in your life, but once you got this one concept down, just understanding how to determine if a commodity is controlled for NS reasons only, then that's half the battle, I promise. That's probably the most complex thing I'm going to explain to you today. Okay. All right. As the questions roll in. All right, here we go. We're moving on. License exception CIV. It's for civil end users and end uses. It is for exports to and re-exports to country group D1. Now remember that country group attachment? Remember when we went to D1 and I said those are the countries where we have a national security concern? Okay, this license exception is for those countries. Okay? Items that require a license to the ultimate destination for national security reasons only. Okay, notice in this case it does not say commodities. It says items. Now if you were with us for the first webinar series that we did this week, you would know that items means commodities, software, and technology. So therefore, license exception CIV is eligible for commodities, software, and technology that require a license to the ultimate destination for national security reasons only. And now you know how to apply that little criteria for when it requires a license for only national security reasons. Okay. The last criteria is that it has to be for civil end uses and civil end users only. No military or proliferation end users or uses may be used for this license exception. And that would include no transfers once the item has gone to, let's say, Germany to a civil end user. You may not transfer it in country to a military end user or proliferation end user or for those uses. Okay, license exception LVS, which is limited value shipment. This one, it was created for those times when you've exported some commodity out of the country and now it's broken. And so now you need to ship something to fix it. And so that's why there's such a low value associated with all the eligible commodities associated with LVS, because the low value is not, the LVS is not meant for usual types of everyday shipments of your goods. It's meant for those emergency times when you need to ship something extra to go with your product or maybe some part or something that goes with it. And so that's what the foundation or why it was created. It is eligible for exports and re-exports to country group B. Those are allied countries. It's only eligible for commodities and not software or technology. It is for a net value not exceeding the LVS value limit. Now, we're going to pull out an attachment again. This attachment is the ECCN example for license exceptions. We're going to go back to that one, where you see the ECCN 3A002. For 3A002, if you look under license exceptions in that red oval or red rectangle, you'll see LVS, and you'll see some dollar values. You'll notice that for 3A002A, E, F, and G, there is an LVS value of $3,000. And for 3A002.B to D, the value is $5,000. Rarely will you see a license exception that is above $5,000. In fact, I'm not even sure if it exists. Usually the limit for LVS on the CCL is $5,000. Okay, so what does that mean to you? If you were shipping a 3A002 product and you needed to ship it right away and the product that you're sending is below that dollar value, and it's going to a Group B country, then LVS may be the license exception for you. Now, I have to warn you that when you use LVS a lot, okay, there is an annual value restriction, okay, and the annual value is 12 times the LVS value of the same ECCN to the same consignee. What does that mean? Okay, you have a customer in Germany, his name is Joe, okay, and you do LVS shipments to him a lot during the calendar year. And so let's say that you're shipping a 3A002.A product, and you see the LVS value there is 3,000. So your annual limit shipping to Joe in Germany would be 12 times 3,000. That's what that means. If you're shipping to Sally in Germany, it'd be a whole different annual value. So this is the annual value only applies when it's the same ECCN going to the same customer. Okay, the value pertains to a single shipment. Single shipment means those goods that are moving at the same time on the same vehicle, so to speak, if it's on the airplane. Let's say that you're shipping 3A00 products and you've got 2 orders from Joe that you received in the same week. One for maybe $2,000 and another one for $2,000. And you happen to put them on the same carrier, like an airplane carrier. They're separate orders, but they're going on the same carrier, and they're both 3A002. If they're both going on the same carrier, moving at the same time, they're the same ECCN going to the same consignee, you've just exceeded LVS, even though they're different orders. So be aware of this restriction. Now, it is illegal to split orders in order to meet the LVS value. Like if Joe has an order for $4,000, but it could be split into 2 $2,000 shipments, that is illegal. You can't circumvent the restrictions in LVS in order to get around them and split orders to do that. That is illegal. So no splitting orders. All right, moving on to license exception, TSR. TSR is for technology and software and not for commodities. So it is also a list-based license exception. You will see it under ECCNs, but you will not see it under commodity ECCNs. You'll only see it under technology or software ECCNs on the Commerce Control List. It is for the export or re-export of technology and software to Country Group B countries. It is for technology and software that require a license to the ultimate destination for national security reasons only. And prior to use, you must have a written assurance from the consignee. Now, there's a written assurance that is for technology, and there's a different one for software. And basically what it assures, what it says in the assurance is that there will be no re-export or release of the technology to D1 countries or E2 nationals. There will be no export of the direct product controlled for national security reasons to D1 or E2 nationals, and no export of a foreign-produced product to D1 or E2 if it is controlled for national security reasons or the plant or major component is a direct product of national security controlled technology. So you get these assurances, but what if you can't get the assurances? Maybe your customer refuses to sign it. If they refuse to sign the assurance, you are not eligible for TSR, and therefore you'll have to come in for a license. I would recommend that in the additional information that you put in the additional information not eligible for TSR could not obtain written assurance, because if you don't, sometimes the licensing officers may make a mistake and RWA or return without action your license application saying, oh, this is eligible for TSR. So you have to make sure that they know that you are not eligible for TSR and why. So, TSR, you have written assurances. The written assurance can be in letter form or it can be included in your contract. If it is included in a contract, you want to make sure that the assurances outlast any expiration date on the contract. So that is TSR. Again, the written assurance can be in letter or other written communication, licensing agreement, or fax. No written assurance, no TSR. Okay, that covers all the list-based license exceptions I'm going to go over. Now we're going to go into transaction-based license exceptions. You will never find a transaction-based license exception listed in the Commerce Control List under the License Exceptions section. There are many of them, but you will not see them listed there. So these are ones that you're just going to have to go to Part 740 to see if you're eligible for. There's 11 of them, and so there are many instances where you could use a transaction-based license exception. I'm going to go over today Temp, RPL, and TSU, which are the most popular transaction-based license exceptions. Also, each of these are grab bags, which I call grab bags because they don't pertain to a particular situation. They pertain to a grab bag of situations, and I'll explain that when we get there. Transaction-based license exceptions are based on the circumstances surrounding your transaction. For instance, temporary license exception temp pertains to an export that is only going to be temporarily exported out of the United States and then come back, or temporary imports into the United States and then shipped out. So it's based on the circumstances around your transaction, not so much the parameters. Okay, license exception temp. It includes a grab bag of things. It includes temporary exports and re-exports. It includes items temporarily in the United States. It has beta test software included in it, and I'm going to talk about each of these. Hold on while I catch up to you on the slides. Okay. Temporary exports and re-exports. This can include things like tools of trade. Tools of trade is a very popular part of Temp that's used. It's for company-owned equipment that is going out with your employees out of the country. For instance, if you have employees that are going out of the country with their BlackBerries or with their laptops, a lot of times you will have to use a license exception for that if a license is required to the country that they're going to. Now remember, for instance, BlackBerries. BlackBerries would be controlled under 5A992. They only require a license to terrorist supporting countries, and so you wouldn't be using, considering Temp tools of trade for a BlackBerry when you're going to, let's say, UK or Germany. You would only be considering Temp if you were going to an embargoed or terrorist supporting country. So for tools of trade, you'll be using why you would use tools of trade for a laptop. You would use it because laptops usually have software that contain encryption. And encryption requires a license in a lot of cases. And so you would use the tools of trade for laptops, not necessarily the laptop, but the software on the laptop. And so tools of trade is for company-owned laptops. If you have a personally owned laptop, it would go under license exception bag, okay? And that's just one of the 9 things that are under Temp, okay, tools of trade. There's also kits of replacement parts that are under temporary exports. Let's say you're sending a repairman out to service your product that you've exported, and he wants to take a kit of replacement parts, so he'll have on hand what he may need to replace in the broken down system. He can take that kit of replacement parts with him to the site, and all those parts, each of those parts may require a license individually, but he can take them all under Temp. And then if he needs to use a part, then I would, if it were me, I would switch over to license exception RPL, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute, where you can be authorized under license exception to replace a part on a system that you have legally exported. But for the whole kit, use Temp. All right, you can use Temp for exhibits and demonstration. Let's say you're sending some piece of equipment out, you're going to demo it in a country. Temp is the license exception you'll use. You can use it for inspection and calibration. If you, let's say you bought a foreign item and now you're sending it back out to the country for inspection or calibration, you can use Temp because it's going to go out temporarily and then come back after it's been inspected or calibrated. For those of you in the media, you can use Temp for broadcast material. If you do assembly in Mexico, you can use Temp for that, to send your parts out there for them to assemble and come back under the Maquiladora program. These are all the types of exports that you would use for, or you would consider Temp. For beta test software, or I guess I should go over the temporary imports. If, let's say that you're importing some foreign item for a demo, and then it's going to be shipped out, you can use Temp for that when it's going to be temporarily in the United States and then go back out. You'll want to use the transportation and exportation customs entry so that you will not have to pay the duties, and so that they know that it's only going to be temporarily in the United States. Also, there are some restrictions that apply to this, so you'll want to look at all the restrictions. One aspect of Temp under this items temporarily in the United States that I use quite often, I probably refer to this at least once a week, is the unwanted, return of unwanted shipments. If you have imported, or let's say that you bought a foreign item and you open the box and it's the wrong item, or it is broken, or you need to just return it out of the country, but it's listed on the Commerce Control List and it requires a license to the country that you bought it from, you can ship it back out under Temp, under this unwanted, return of unwanted shipments. The only criteria that you have to meet is that you did not change the characteristics or capabilities of the foreign-made product, and you're not returning it to Cuba. So that one's a very popular one. You want to pull this out of your pocket because I know that you all are dealing with foreign-made goods all the time, and so keep this one handy. Let's go on to beta test software. Let's say that you're a software developer country or company, and you have your beta testers outside of the country. And this software is something that would require a license. You can send it to your beta testers on a temporary basis just for them to beta test under Temp. And then they can return it back with all their suggestions for improvements. All right, moving on. RPL. RPL, you will, if you're an export manager, export control person, you are going to use RPL in your lifetime, probably many times. It is a grab bag also. It is for the servicing and replacement of parts and equipment. There's one section that's called one-for-one replacement of parts, and then there's another section for servicing and replacement of commodities and software. Okay, replacement of parts. We're going to talk about that one first. Replacement parts means parts needed for the immediate repair of equipment, including replacement of defective or worn parts, including subassemblies, but not test instruments or operating supplies. The items that improve or change the basic design characteristics, for example, as to accuracy, capability, performance, or productivity of the equipment upon which they are installed are not deemed to be replacement parts. Therefore, you see at the bottom that big block on the slide that says no enhancements. If you are sending a one-for-one replacement part under RPL, it cannot enhance the equipment. There are a bunch of criteria which you have to meet in order to use RPL. Some of these are, it is for the replacement of parts contained in commodities that were legally exported or re-exported or made in a foreign country incorporating authorized U.S. origin parts. Conditions of the original authorization must have been met only by the party who originally exported or re-exported the commodity or by a party that has confirmed the appropriate authority for the original transaction. And the replacement part must be destroyed or returned. All right, servicing. Let's go into servicing a little bit. This is for exports and re-exports of commodities or software that were returned to the U.S. for servicing and replacement of defective or unacceptable U.S. origin commodities or software. So you have exported or sold some piece of equipment out there, and it gets to its destination. Let's use Joe in Germany again. Gets to Joe, he's out there and he opens a box and the piece of equipment is broken. He needs to send it back to you for servicing or replacement. He can send it back to you. If you legally exported it to Joe in the first place, he can send it back to you. You can service it, fix it, or you can replace it altogether under RPL, under this section. Servicing, as used in this section, means inspection, testing, calibration, or repair, including overhaul or reconditioning. The servicing shall not have improved or changed the basic characteristics. So again, we go back to that big block at the bottom of the slide, no enhancements. So if you've upgraded since you last sold this equipment to Joe, you cannot upgrade it at the time that you're servicing it. You have to only bring it up to the parameters that it was sold at. Okay, it is RPL. This part of RPL may not be used for terrorist supporting countries. It may include any replacement or rebuilt parts necessary to its repair. Going to different countries, it has to have been legally exported. And if it was legally exported and had conditions, all the conditions have to have been met for you to use RPL. All right. Replacements for defective or unacceptable U.S. origin equipment. Now, we sort of went over that, so I'm not going to go over that again. All right, moving on. We are just flying through these license exceptions. We are now at TSU. TSU is a license exception for technology and software unrestricted. It is for exports and re-exports, and it is a big grab bag. It is for operating technology and software, sales technology, bug fixes, general software, note, mass market software. It is for publicly available encryption source code and corresponding object code. And you'll notice in the mass market software it says not encryption. That's because mass market encryption is eligible under a whole different aspect of the encryption controls. You'll find that under 742.15 of the EAR. Okay, let us go into TSU. Let's start with operating technology and software. This is for technology that is the minimum necessary for installation, operation, maintenance, repair of products that are eligible for license exception or that are exported under a license. For instance, you sell a piece of equipment. Oops, forgot the manuals. Okay? You can ship the manuals, which is considered technology, okay, under this license exception TSU. Okay? If you forgot the operating software, okay, you can ship it under TSU. All right, let us move on. There are restrictions under that part of TSU, so you have to go in there and read it carefully. Let's go on to sales technology. This is for exports and re-exports to all destinations. I'm sure if you're in a private sector company that you have put together a sales proposal, which is a big headache, takes a lot of your man hours, and you put it together carefully. It's delivered by, securely. You put a lot of work into it. This is the type of sales technology that would go under TSU. Okay, remember, we're only using license exceptions for technology or software that requires a license. So this would be like proprietary information, not information that's publicly available. If you're going to some demo and you're taking brochures that you would give to anybody, or that you're giving out information that's on your website, this is publicly available. This is not the sales technology that we're talking about here. We're talking about sales technology that is proprietary, that you would only give to serious customers. It would include it would not include so much as the information that would give them the development or production or use of the product, but it is proprietary. And so this one sort of walks a fine line. It is for exports and re-exports to all destinations, and that covers sales technology. Let's go into bug fixes. Let's say that you sent a piece of software out of the country and it has bugs. You can send out the fixes, the software that fixes those bugs under TSU, as long as it just brings it up to the capability that you were authorized to ship. All right, and the bug fixes have to be to software that was legally exported. If somehow somebody got your software and you have no idea how they got it, you don't have any record of it, you don't know that it was legally exported to them, you may not send the bug fixes to them under TSU. All right, moving on to general software note, mass market software. This is for exports and re-exports to all destinations except for the E1 countries. These are the terrorist supporting countries. These are software that meet the general software note found in supplement number 2 to part 774, which states basically software that is sold in a usual manner like catalogs or over-the-counter in the usual retail manner. But this is software that is not publicly available. It is actually sold for profit. It is out there. It is mass market. It's sold all over the world, sold in large quantities. And usually you can export that under TSU. This means this type of software is available for release of software that is generally available to the public. That means no pre-qualifying customers or selling only to software developers, okay? So to use the general software note, you can't restrict customers. It has to be available to everybody. All right. Lastly, we come to publicly available encryption source code. Encryption is its own animal under the Export Administration Regulations. It doesn't follow any of the rules in the Export Administration Regulations, where software and technology in most of the world, if it were publicly available, would be not subject to our controls. Encryption that is publicly available are subject to our control. And so some of that, though, can go out under license exception TSU. So what you have to know about that one, it has to be posted on the Internet, for instance, to be publicly available. It applies to corresponding object code made publicly available. It just doesn't apply to the source code. It can be the corresponding object code. For those of you that don't know what the difference is between object and source code, I'll let you know, and this is free, and it's a bonus. Source code. Source code are the lines of program that the programmer actually writes to make a software program work, but those software lines of code cannot be read by a computer. It has to be compiled into zeros and ones, which are the object code, which a computer can read, and so, but which you cannot. And so the object code is the zeros and ones that the computer can read. The source code is readable lines of program that you can read. Okay, it's sort of like the blueprints for the for the software. Okay, now publicly available encryption source code can go under TSU. However, there is a notification requirement under TSU. All you have to do is send an email and notify us where you found this publicly available source code. Once you have made that notification, you are eligible to ship under TSU. There are other criteria which you have to meet, so look at 740.13e. All right, we have reached the end of our license exception talk. Just make sure that your transaction requires a license before you go to the trouble of looking at a license exception. So make sure there's an X in the box. Before going to a specific license exception, make sure there are no general restrictions or general prohibitions. Remember where the general restrictions are? 740 point what? Yes, 740.2. Okay, each exception is unique, so make sure you meet all of the criteria. And one more point that isn't on there, whenever you use a license exception symbol on an export control document, you are certifying that you have met the criteria. So do not use it if you do not meet the criteria.
Great. Thank you very much, Sharon, for your expertise in this area. That was very thorough, and I'm sure many of you have some questions. So I'm going to open up the telephone lines to ask a voice question. To ask a voice question, please press *1. And once again, those handouts are on that upper right-hand side of your computer. There's an icon there. If you put your mouse cursor over that icon, it says handouts, and then you can get a copy of each of these handouts by clicking on each of the boxes and downloading them to your computer, and then from there you can print them out. So we'll give it to the operator then.
Thank you. Once again, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 on your touch-tone phone. Please remember to unmute your phone and record your name clearly when prompted. You may withdraw a question by pressing *2. Once again, to ask a question, please press *1 now. One moment, please. At this time, I'm showing no questions.
Okay, we'll go to our first written question here from Arlene Salcy. The question is, what does the written assurance has to state?
Okay, the written assurance, as I stated, there are different written assurances under TSR, license exception TSR, for technology and for software. Okay, basically what it has to state is that there's no re-export or release to D1 or E2 nationals. There's no export of the direct product controlled for national security to D1 or E2 nationals or to D1 countries. And there's no export of a foreign produced direct product to D1 or E2. So that's what the assurances have to state.
And the second part of that question from Arlene is, can you use the tools of trade, BlackBerry, et cetera, to access information technology that is restricted for the country you're transiting through to get to your destination where the respective technology use does not require a license?
All right, that was a full question. Let me read through that again.
Can you use the tools of trade, for example, BlackBerry, to access information, the technology that is restricted for the country?
Okay. When you are exporting, it doesn't have to be just carried with you. Let's say that you're exporting using your BlackBerry. You're exporting the BlackBerry, all the information on it, and the software on it. So you have to consider all those pieces of information, the commodity, the BlackBerry, the technology that's on it, which is technology, the software that runs it, okay, and that's included in it. So you're going to have to look at the export requirements for each of those parts. Okay, the BlackBerry, again, I said was 5D992. The technology that you have on it could be proprietary, could be listed on our Commerce Control List. You'll have to determine whether that requires a license when you take the BlackBerry out of the country. Now, even if you transmit technology out of the country, it's considered to be an export, and you will have to determine whether that technology requires a license to the destination where that BlackBerry is, okay? And then the software. If you have apps on your BlackBerry or different things that have encryption, a lot of apps have encryption, you'll have to consider the 5D992 aspects of your apps. And so a lot of times all this bundled falls under tools of trade, but not necessarily. So you're going to have to evaluate how you send out your laptops and BlackBerries. I'll tell you, when I go to these export seminars, I talk to a lot of people, and their common practice now is to send out a clean BlackBerry or to send out a clean laptop that does not contain any of the information that could be lost by dropping the BlackBerry somewhere or somebody picking up the laptop in a different country. They just don't want to lose that proprietary information or access anymore. So what they do is they give you a clean laptop, a clean BlackBerry, and you just take it out. If you have information, it's good to keep it on a flash drive where you can carry it with you at all times and have effective control of it instead of keeping it on a laptop that you won't carry to a restaurant or you won't take out when you're socializing or networking.
Thank you, Sharon. Next question from the written portion of the Q&A is from Tyson Thrasher. When using license exceptions such as TSU or LSU, where should you indicate the license exception that is being used?
If you are using the license exception, a lot of times it's required on the AES or Shipper's Export document. There is a place on there that says license number or license symbol, and so you'll put that license exception symbol in that block. There are some cases where you will be exempt from that requirement to fill out a Shipper's Export Declaration or AES. You'll have to look at the census regulations to see if you're exempt. But if you are exempt from filling out the Shipper's Export Declaration or AES, then you should keep a record of that export in your files. The record-keeping responsibilities go for 5 years, and so for 5 years you'll be keeping a record of that export.
Great, thank you. We'll go now to voice questions, if we have any more voice questions, and then we'll go back to the written portion and then conclude.
And there are no questions on the phone.
Okay. Continuing on, we have a couple more questions here. One is from Marianne and Henito. Excuse me if I didn't pronounce that correctly. When answering an RFQ for equipment covered under 3A981 to a country such as Pakistan, would we need a license since this is for crime control, or can we use the TSU for the written bid documents?
Yeah, Pakistan is not one of those countries, I believe, that's exempt from the crime control restriction and license exceptions. Look under 740.2 and you will see the restriction that pertains to crime control, and then it will send you to a different section in the EAR. Just one moment, I'm looking it up in the Code of Federal Regulations. Federal Regulations, there's a section 742.11 that deals with specially designed implements of torture, thumb screws, and thumb cuffs and things like that. There's also a section that deals with other crime control type items. Hold on just a moment and I'll find that section for you. It's under 742.7. And when you look under 742.7, it lists all the items that are controlled for crime control reasons. And so you can see which items are there. Let's see. And 3A981 is one of those items. And so if it is one of those items, then you will not be able to use the license exceptions because it is controlled for crime control. And it's going to a country that is not signed up for the crime control aspects that we uphold to in the United States. So you would be coming in for a license.
Okay, great, thank you. Nancy Frannis has a question. Just wonder if you can help. There are also import concerns that involves a long list of foreign countries that require an import license to bring encryption into their country. The web has information that is outdated, and I can't find a site that gives accurate, current information. So can you provide a source, as this is outside the scope? Maybe we can answer that offline, or... Okay, Angela Robinson said to help you with this question, call Expert Counseling at 202-482-4811.
Yeah. Also, you can call the division that handles encryption. Their number is 202-482-0707.
Great, thank you very much. Deborah Hallaby, this is our last question. Question refers to these BlackBerries and iPhones. They travel with owners daily overseas. Are you saying that licensing or declaring an exemption is required when they fly on vacation as well when traveling for work?
Well, if they personally own the iPhones or BlackBerries or laptops, then it would travel under bag. There's a license exception bag for baggage of U.S. citizens, and so most likely it'll qualify for bag. And so, you know, no one's going to ask you, do you have a license authority to export this out of the country? But you never know when somebody will. There's always that anxious to please customs official that may be there saying, you know, do you have a license or authority to ship that out? And if you do run into this person, you can tell them, oh, yeah, I'm shipping this under license exception bag. That's for personally owned BlackBerries, iPhones, laptops. If it's company-owned, it'll be going under license exception temp, tools of trade. So am I saying that you have to do it? Most likely you won't run into a situation where you will, but rest assured we have license exceptions that cover your situation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sharon. Well, that concludes our presentation and our webinar for today. Once again, for those of you who might have questions after this webinar, please do call those numbers again, 202-482-4811. And also, you can still write your written question on the Q&A icon that's in this webinar. I will be saving those questions. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you for your interest in this webinar series. This is the 5th, I believe, of the 9 webinars that we are presenting this week. If you'd like to register for the additional webinars, go on to www.export.gov, and on the middle of that page you will see an advertisement, an announcement indicating the other webinars that we are showing for this series. This is a great opportunity to take advantage of this information. Also, I'd like to thank Sharon Cook for her excellent presentation, and also Angela Robinson for her input in making this webinar happen. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and please check your email boxes for more information on upcoming webinars. Goodbye.